I had to pull over and I'm like, no way, no way, no way, no way. Today was intense. We came an inch away from a mistrial, or at least throwing out one of the major charges against Chad. So much for an uneventful final day for the prosecution, a short day in court. No, not at all. So much happened today. It was nail biting. You gotta hear all this. It's just nuts. So, welcome to True Crime, Faith, and Chocolate. I am your host, Annette Lyon, USA Today bestselling author of the suspense novel Just One More and a whole bunch of other stuff. I am also a woman of faith, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Unfortunately, the same faith as Chad and Lori, at least formerly. They're excommunicated, but and a true crime junkie, which is why I do this channel. And I'll be covering a lot of cases dealing with faith and religion and where they overlap. And unfortunately, there's a lot to do with Latter-day Saint crime right now. If you're new here, give us a like and a subscribe below. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single video. We're still new and growing, and I'm thrilled to be getting the response we have, and I would love to keep growing, and that really, really helps us out. Today was supposed to be the day where we hear one final witness and then the state rests, and so they planned for an early out. They didn't even plan lunch for the jurors, and then yet it was the longest day of court in this entire process since April 1st. Because that's how this case goes. Oh, my Lanta. When part of this came down, I was listening as I'm driving along. I catching up. I was a little bit behind on the feed because I had some places to go and things to do. And then I came to one part of the trial today and I seriously was like, what the heck? I had to pull over and I'm like, no way, no way, no way, no way. Things are going to be okay. But it was dicey for a little bit. It all because of a stupid typo. And I'm wondering what person out there, what paralegal receptionist did this typo and almost cost JJ the ability to get justice for himself. Okay. But first, let's go into what was supposed to be today. The final witness was Doug Hart from the FBI. He was also the final witness in Lori's case. So it made sense that he would be the final witness in Chad's as well. He has some insights that no one else had brought in, things that we had heard in Lori's trial, things we had not. A lot of it wasn't groundbreaking and earth-shattering, but it is like taking the things we knew and ratcheting it up a notch. He gets up on the stand. He talks about his training in looking for covert burial sites. He had been on the case from the beginning. So that was incredibly powerful because he knew everything. One of the things that I believe that they saved him for was some of the same things that they used him and his statements for on Lori's trial. And that is, not only did these people conspire to and carry out the murders of Charles, of course Charles is a different case, but Charles and Tylee and JJ and Tammy, but they had premeditation and they were particularly cruel. So here are some texts that we learned about today. Again, going with some of the weird religious beliefs. And I say this as a Latter-day Saint. Chad's beliefs are nowhere on the map, okay, of what we actually believe. Here are some of the texts. This was from Chad to Lori. This is late July after Charles has been murdered. Lori's in the car or something. And so Chad says, one question, do you want me to cause pain yet to those two threes you're writing with? Meaning three darks, two people who were dark. And that would be her children. Do you want me to cause pain? She replies with, I'll probably hold off on them till we arrive. They will be a mistake to deal with, but I'll text you if they start acting up and we can zap them. Miserable, not mistake. So that was, she corrected herself. It'll be it would be miserable to deal with. And Chad replies, sounds great. Yes, if they are going to act up, we'll at least give them a reason to scream. They are consciously planning to cause pain, physical pain, to her children. Tylee, who was only 16, and JJ, who was 7, mind you, and special needs. And then as soon as, in the same text, mind you, as Chad says, we'll give them a reason to scream, he continues by saying, I love, cherish, treasure, and adore you. The wonderful memories just keep coming back. You are mesmerizing. Raphael is one lucky guy. Raphael meaning himself. It's one of his many names he liked to go by. There is zero sadness, zero remorse, zero sympathy, compassion, empathy for a child who would be having pain. He also testified to plans to remove obstacles to their happiness. Again, premeditation. And he said, based on my investigation and my experience, those obstacles were their spouses and their children. Specifically, Lori's children, because somehow Chad's children got spared, probably because they were all adults, honestly, but who knows. One thing that was very important, that was different from Lori's trial, because we're trying to make sure Chad is the one culpable here. Lori has already been found guilty for her part, but this was important for undermining the defense's argument that Lori was the one driving all of this. He quotes many texts, and I won't go through them all, but he does quote many texts that they found in the iCloud about Lori coming to Chad for validation, for questions, for reassurance, for instructions. Like, what am I supposed to do here? Is this person light or dark? Can you do this for me? Ask about this. And it was always Chad giving her those instructions. It was never the other way around. It was Chad giving her reassurance when she asked for it. It was Chad that was always the go-to, the leader in this situation. Tammy took a road trip from Rexburg to Springville, Utah, from Idaho, by herself, which was very unusual. This was early October, I believe, or maybe late September. I'm forgetting the date. But it was right after Lori had moved to Rexburg. And it was unusual because Tammy did not like driving long distances by herself. But Chad encouraged her to go. Some people had suspected that maybe this was a glimmer of conscience on his part of let her have one final visit with her family. Now we know, no, that's not what this was. He got her out of town. He could get together with Lori at home and have their first real date at their house. And they used a bit of a guise with Zulema, supposedly. I mean, like, oh, text Chad and ask if he can come over and you can tell him about your trip to Chile, and, you know, all of fake crap as a supposed cover. But that was why they got Tammy out of the way, so that they could have a tryst at his house. So that's classy, Chad. And then here are some of the other gross things. These are some of the direct quotes. He says, "You are so adorable, beautiful, wonderful, heavenly, luscious, and angelic. So many divine attributes rolled into one dynamic, desirable package. I want you even more desperately than you want me." In case there was any wonder whether Chad is a completely crappy writer. And then he adds, "Just grab me by the storm, and I will follow you to the ends of the universe." We'll get to that in a second. Lori replies, "When might that be?" And he says, this is referring to when she gets to come over, because Tammy will be out of town. He says Wednesday evening, and then repeatedly and gloriously until Friday. And then Lindsay Blake of the state asks Agent Hart what the storm is in reference to. And if you know, you know. That's Chad Daybell's. Because, you know, they're classy. It really is like 14-year-olds. It's completely ridiculous. Lori texts Chad, basically saying that after we have our date, just and then what? Back to crying and saying goodbye, back to the box. Like she's, kind of like the cupboard under the stairs, and he made the comparison to himself as being like Harry Potter. And I will point out again that he said at the Dudleys. Dudley is his cousin's first name. The house is the Dursleys. You freaking idiot. But anyway, then Chad replies, this trip to Utah, Tammy's trip, had a lot of finality to it. I was told extreme changes are coming for me and to Utah. I welcome them both. Prosecutor Lindsay Blake says, do you know what those extreme changes would be? And he said, well, within 3 months of this date, Tylee, JG, and Tammy are all dead. Holy moly. Something that really bothered me that Chad said. This is again to Lori in a text about Tammy's sister Samantha. He calls her Sam here. And he refers to Brandon, who we know, of course, is Brandon Boudreaux, who there was an attempted murder on him by Alex. Brandon Boudreaux, again, was the husband of Melanie Boudreaux, now Pulowski, who is Lori's niece, but very much a daughter figure. This is what Chad said about Tammy's sister, Sam. Sam is much like Brandon. She has been my biggest enemy over the years. She refuses to read my books. Okay, I gotta pause right there because ego much? Like, I've published literally dozens of works, okay? Like, over a dozen novels, several dozen novellas and collections, over 100 articles, yada yada. I've done a lot. I don't think anyone in my family has read everything I've written. And I don't find offense at that. I've written a lot. I don't expect it. I find it lovely if someone has decided to read my stuff. And most writers are like this. You'd be surprised at how many writers have family who have never read their stuff. It's a thing. And yet Chad he's all pissed off over it. Okay. Anyway, apparently Sam didn't like his books, or she didn't want to read them, which frankly I hear they're absolute crap, so why would she? Except if you're a prophet and you think your books are scripture, but okay. So he goes on that she then threw the biggest fit when we moved to Idaho. And I'm thinking, well, we actually heard from Samantha William. We talked about her. She and her husband, Jason, both testified. And she and Tammy were very, very close. I would suspect that she cried. She was sad. Tammy didn't want to move to Rexburg. And so having Samantha say, Chad, do you really have to go? Come on, like, or something like that. And he interpreted that as she threw a fit. No. Then he goes on, she has only visited us when the kids got married and always fled Idaho within hours like she was being burned. Maybe she just didn't like to be around you, Chad, because being around you is like being burned because you're a horrible, evil person. There's a thought. If someone draws a line and kind of starts cutting someone out of their life, maybe there's a reason for it, and maybe they're not the bad person. Just an idea. Crazy. Oh, and this is just the editor in me. Like she was being burned. Technically, that should be as if she were. Not like as if, and then she were being burned because she wasn't being burned, so it's subjunctive mood again, you freaking idiot. Anyway, then he says she's definitely comparable to Brandon and Summer. Summer being one of Lori's sisters. And then he goes into not really sure for the timing for removal. And he's talking removal of the person from the planet, meaning Tammy. And at this point, he has been telling Lori that, okay, well, Tammy is in limbo. She has another spirit named Viola inside her. So then this is on the heels of that. Not really sure of the timing for removal, but once her actions verify the differences, I don't want to wait. That's intent. Very clear intent. If he is Mr. Prophet, though, why would he need to have actions to verify the differences? And not that there were any differences to verify. It was 4 days after he sent that text to Lori about not wanting to wait that Alex tried to kill Tammy with the gun, the AR-15. And we learned from the day before, and we'll go into some of that testimony in another video because that's important stuff. But essentially, we learned likely why the gun misfired. There was a loose pin in there, and this particular agent talked about how if that pin is usually in pretty tight, but if it comes out, then the gun will kind of fall apart easily. And when he found that gun in Alex's apartment, I guess, it did fall apart pretty easily. It wasn't in place tightly. And if that's the case, it won't fire. It might fire one round, but after that, it's useless. So that is likely what happened. Thank heavens, because who knows if that gun had fired and Tammy had died that way, we might not have put all of this together when we did. Scary stuff. So that was 4 days after Chad said, I don't want to wait. We jumped ahead a bit to the day after Tammy died. About 26 hours after Tammy has been declared dead, Lori sends this text to Chad. I feel lovesick. I don't want to eat. I just want you. It's so consuming. Now, one might think that is incredibly heartless when someone just lost their spouse. Even if it was murder, it's still probably a shock, whatever. But no, Chad replies, I know exactly how you feel. I'm feeling sad. But it isn't for the reason everyone thinks! Exclamation point. Yeah, let that sink in. After Agent Hart was done testifying, then of course Pryor got to do his cross. There was limited redirect after that. Not a whole lot there. Expected things. Pryor trying to poke holes where there are no holes to be poked. The state rests their case, as we expected. As they told us yesterday, they had one witness left. More can come forward after this. The defense has put forth their case in chief as rebuttal witnesses, but their case in chief would be over. They rested their case. Then, as expected, this is something that a defense lawyer always does, is basically say, okay, judge, I'm going to ask for a directed verdict, which would mean, for those of us not in the law world, essentially that there has not been enough evidence to justify even giving the case to the jury to decide. There's nothing here, so judge, you just give us an acquittal right now because there's not enough evidence for anything. And that's kind of standard procedure. It rarely works for obvious reasons, but the state with Ms. Beatty responded with all kinds of just summary evidence, and I went point by point of all these different overt acts that clearly show enough preponderance of evidence to say that the jury should be given the right to look at it and decide what is relevant and true, and to give a verdict on that. And Boyce agreed. However, and this was the bombshell of the day, Boyce says there is a problem. So I'm ready to rule on all of the different counts except for one, about whether this should go to the jury. And essentially it was that yes, the state has given enough evidence to justify the jury deliberating, but there is a problem with count 4. As this little part went on, my heart sank and I just about freaked out. So here is what Chad is officially charged with. Okay. He is charged with 3 counts each of conspiracy to commit murder and 3 charges each of first-degree murder for his wife Tammy, for Tylee, and for JJ. So that's 6 counts right there. He's also charged for grand theft and insurance fraud. Just to compare with Lori's case, she was not charged with first-degree murder on Tammy. She was charged with conspiracy to kill Tammy, not with her murder, but conspiracy. And she had grand theft by deception, but she did not have insurance fraud charges. So just slight tweaks there. So Chad's charges are somewhat more serious. And of course, his case is a capital potential death sentence case for him. So the problem, here's the thing. As the charges come out and there's the indictments and then they do amended this, that, the other, in the most recent amended indictment, apparently, somehow, charge 4, which is JJ's death, so murder 1 charge for him, his death date was listed incorrectly, the same dates as Tylee's, so September 8th to 9th of 2019. And it was phrased as killed on or between September 8th and 9th, rather than on or around or about, which would give a more leeway. But that's when Tylee was killed, not when JJ was. And that's a problem because the indictment is what the jury goes by. More than that, if the state had noticed this typo, they could have made forth a motion to fix it up until the moment they rested their case. But they didn't notice it, and they rested their case. And then Pryor was out there smiling all smug because he had noticed, and he didn't say a thing. He knew they were kind of screwed on that. And this is a huge problem. Judge Boyce was the one who brought it up. And I'm glad he did, because we need to make sure that this is not going to have any way that Chad can get off, that any appeal for an overturned verdict or a new trial will work. We need this to be so buttoned up that he is behind bars for life or executed, one or the other, but that is it, period, end of story. And yet, if this one issue had not been noticed and dealt with, it could have led to a mistrial on some level. And so I'm glad Boyce brought it up, but it was horrifying to realize that this one major charge on JJ might have to be thrown out because the whole state had misstated the dates. So the state said, could we have till Monday to research and come back with our response? He said, no, we really need to get, the time is of the essence. We need to get moving to the defense's case in chief. That needs to start on Monday. You have 2 hours. Come back at 2:30 and we'll talk, essentially. All of this is outside of the jury's hearing. They were dismissed. And apparently in the jury room given instructions and then let go for the day. Court was nowhere near done for the day. Usually the court ends at 3 or 3:30, sometimes 2:30, depending. This was not going to end anytime soon. So they broke for lunch. Everyone is losing their minds at this point. I was so scared, because JJ deserves to have justice for himself. He deserves to have that guilty verdict. At the same time, if the other charges give Chad life behind prison or the death penalty, then yes, there is justice for JJ. However, there's just something about JJ deserving to have that as well. And I also worried that without JJ on the table, as far as the charges go, maybe they would lessen his sentence. I think he will be found guilty regardless. There is so much evidence. But maybe the jury would be less severe on Chad if a sweet little 7-year-old special needs boy who clawed his face to escape being suffocated by someone he loved and trusted, if that is taken off the table, maybe Chad's sentence would be less. And JJ deserves better than that. So I was very worried. Anyway, so they came back into session, and Ms. Beatty was the one making the argument for the state, and I am sure they had everybody working in their office Googling case law from Idaho anything they could use. And they threw out all kinds of cases saying, in this one, it was shown that this particular charge, the date didn't matter whether it was to prove he did it or not. It wasn't a murder situation, and Boyce wasn't entirely swayed by that argument. There were several different arguments. And it looked for a time that, sorry, a clerical error is not enough and you should have noticed it. But the thing that finally tipped the scales, thank heavens, was the fact that the state pointed out that in all of the initial indictment and all of the amended indictments up until this last one, the dates were correct. And the last amendment was not supposed to affect charge number 4, which was the one about JJ. So the state has to make a request for an amendment. The judge has to approve that change. And then you have the amended indictment. So they said the state never requested for this date to be changed. Judge, you never approved this date change. Therefore, the amended indictment should not include that. It was never requested or approved. It's clearly just a clerical error, a typo, and it should not be held against us or against JJ. And that seems to be the piece of the puzzle that finally clicked. Legally speaking, the Boyce, I really felt like he wanted to make sure that he could include that charge, but he needed solid legal ground to do so. This hearing went on, and I'm not getting into all of the case law. That was what it came down to, was that this change was never requested. It was never approved. It was clearly never intended to happen. And this date was never in question in any of the prior versions in the last 3 years. The initial indictment came down in May of 2021 against Chad. And in all of the versions since, it's been correct, except for this last one that was approved, I think in January or February of this year. It was recent. So thank heavens that they figured that part out. Boyce agreed with that. He said he will figure out over the weekend how he will fix it, whether it will be reopening the state's case so they can officially amend it that way, fix it, whether it will be just what you call a curative statement to the jury, explaining to them this was a typo, blah, blah, blah. But yes, JJ is still part of the case. His death is still there to be considered and given justice for. Thank heavens. Whew. But yeah, I have to tell you, the idea that a typo, and if you say, well, why didn't anyone notice? Coming from someone who's published a lot, typos can get past so many people. You can have dozens of eyeballs looking at something and a typo can still get through. It just does. I've seen typos on author names, and I've seen you will almost invariably find a typo somewhere in something. It does not surprise me that no one noticed this, because it's been the correct way all along, and then all of a sudden something happened. Maybe it was a copy and paste error from something else. I don't know, but whatever it was, it should not stop justice. And I am so glad they figured out a way to make sure that this is not going to cause a mistrial. It's not going to cause JJ's count to be removed, because again, he deserves justice. And I cannot tell you how relieved I was. And I can only imagine how relieved his family and loved ones are. If I, who've just been following this for all these years, if I am this invested, I can only imagine the relief that Kay and Larry Woodcock especially are experiencing right now. So, oh, there you go. I'm going to cry again. Okay. And this is, well, folks, is why we wear waterproof mascara. So, if you stuck with me this long, please go ahead and give us a like and a subscribe. Hit that notification button. It's been a big one, and I really appreciate your support. It's been good, and I was so intent on getting this done and recorded today that I didn't even bring chocolate with me, but I do have my chocolate protein shake, so that'll count for my chocolate for this video. So yeah, you need something sweet, because oh heavens to Betsy, after today I think we all need a little bit of something. Anyway, go get some.